Have you ever wondered why some people walk into a room and instantly command respect without saying a single word? Why certain individuals seem to operate on a different frequency, where their silence carries more weight than others' loudest proclamations? Imagine possessing a presence so powerful that your mere existence shifts the energy of every space you enter, not through desperate attention-seeking, but through something far more profound and terrifying. Picture this. You're in a crowded room and someone enters. Not with fanfare, not with announcement, but with an invisible force that makes conversations pause mid-sentence. Eyes don't turn with admiration or curiosity. They turn with something deeper, something primal. Fear mixed with respect. Caution wrapped in fascination. That person doesn't need to prove anything because their reputation precedes them like a shadow that never lifts. They don't seek validation because validation is a currency they've transcended long ago. This isn't about popularity, applause, or being the center of attention. This is about something Machiavelli understood centuries ago when he wrote about power in its purest, most undiluted form. This is about becoming untouchable, not through aggression or loudness, but through strategic invisibility, calculated mystery, and the kind of presence that makes people second-guess every word they about to speak in your vicinity. What if I told you that the most powerful people in history weren't the ones who shouted the loudest, but the ones who whispered the least? That true dominance doesn't come from being everywhere, but from being rare? That the moment you become predictable, you become dispensable. And the moment you become dispensable, you've lost the only game that truly matters. Machiavelli never sought to be liked. He sought to be untouchable, cold, strategic, unbreakable. He understood something that most people spend their entire lives missing. That power isn't given, it's taken. Not through force, but through the deliberate construction of a persona so enigmatic that it becomes impossible to attack, impossible to manipulate, impossible to ignore. You see, when they speak your name in whispers, when no one dares to challenge you directly, when your silence becomes more threatening than 1,000 words of others, you've crossed a threshold that most people don't even know exists. You've moved beyond the realm of ordinary human interaction into something that borders on legend. But here's where most people get it completely wrong. They think untouchability comes from being harsh, cruel, or unnecessarily aggressive. They mistake tyranny for authority, volume for power, reaction for strength. The truly untouchable understand that real power is surgical, precise, and often invisible until it's too late to counter it. It's the difference between the lightning and the thunder. Everyone notices the thunder, but the lightning is already struck before you hear a sound. The untouchable persona isn't born from natural talent or inherited privilege. It's built brick by methodical brick, through distance, through silence, through absolute control over emotion and image. It's constructed through the strategic denial of access, the careful management of mystery, and the relentless discipline to never reveal your full hand, no matter how desperately others beg to see it. Think about the people who truly intimidate you. Not the loud ones, not the obviously aggressive ones, but the quiet ones whose thoughts you can never quite read. The ones who seem to know something you don't. The ones who watch more than they speak, who pause before responding, who make you feel like you're being evaluated every time you interact with them. They're not trying to impress you. They're making you impress them. They're not seeking your approval. They're making you seek theirs. This is the fundamental shift that separates the touchable from the untouchable. The touchable are constantly defending themselves, constantly reacting, constantly explaining their value and justifying their actions. They live in a perpetual state of response, always one step behind the narrative, always catching up to accusations, always trying to correct misunderstandings. They exhaust themselves in the pursuit of being understood, liked, accepted. The untouchable operate from an entirely different paradigm. They don't explain because explanation implies accountability to others' opinions. They don't defend because defense suggests they've been successfully attacked. They don't react because reaction gives others the power to control their emotional state. Instead, they respond with outcomes. Cold, calculated, final outcomes that render further discussion unnecessary. Power does not come from being everywhere. It comes from being rare. It begins where access ends. Think about this carefully. The more available you are, the more people feel entitled to your time, attention, and energy. And entitlement is the sworn enemy of respect. If they can reach you any time, they'll speak to you with less care. If they know you'll always be there, they'll value your presence less. This isn't cynicism. This is human nature in its rawest form. Machiavelli understood that nature is not to be trusted. It is to be controlled. People are predictable in their unpredictability. They will always test boundaries, always push limits, always try to extract maximum value while providing minimum respect. The untouchable persona is built on the recognition of this fundamental truth and the strategic response to it. Every time you deny access, you increase your value. Every time you pull back when they expect you to lean in, you create a vacuum that they feel compelled to fill. Every time you remain silent when they expect explanation, you force them to project their own fears and assumptions onto that silence, usually making you far more dangerous in their minds than you actually are. This is where most people make their crucial error. They assume that being mysterious means being absent, that being untouchable means being unreachable. But true power lies in the balance. You must be visible but unreachable, present but limited, available but controlled. It's the difference between disappearing completely and appearing selectively. One makes you irrelevant, the other makes you invaluable. The psychology of scarcity is brutal in its simplicity. When something becomes harder to obtain, its perceived value increases exponentially. When someone becomes harder to read, they become more intriguing. When access becomes limited, desire intensifies. This isn't manipulation in the traditional sense. This is understanding and working with psychological principles that govern all human interaction. But here is the crucial element that transforms this from mere social strategy into genuine power. Your presence must carry weight. Scarcity without substance is just absence. Mystery without capability is just confusion. You can't simply withdraw and expect respect. You must withdraw after establishing that your presence matters, that your words carry consequence, that your approval is worth earning. This is why the construction of the untouchable persona requires such precise timing and execution. You must first demonstrate value before you can restrict access to it. You must first show that you're worth reaching before you can make yourself harder to reach. The sequence matters because power without foundation crumbles under scrutiny. Consider how this plays out in real-world dynamics. The person who never responds to messages immediately, who considers before speaking, who appears at some events, but not others, who engages selectively rather than universally. They're not being difficult for the sake of difficulty. They're training others to value their participation. They're creating a framework where their engagement becomes a privilege rather than an expectation. And this training happens through consistency, not through explanation. You don't announce your new boundaries. You simply implement them. You don't justify your selectivity. You simply practice it. The moment you explain why you're pulling back, you've undermined the entire strategy because explanation implies that your actions require external validation. The truly untouchable understand that their time must feel expensive, their presence must feel sacred, and their attention must feel earned. Even kindness, when it comes from them, should feel like a reward rather than a habit. This doesn't mean being cruel or unnecessarily harsh. It means being intentional with your emotional and social investment. This is where we begin to see the deeper psychology of power dynamics. Most people are addicted to accessibility, to being needed, to being the solution to others' problems. They derive their sense of worth from how quickly they respond, how available they are, how useful they can be. But this addiction is the foundation of their own subjugation, because once you make yourself indispensable through availability, you become trapped by that same availability. The untouchable flip this dynamic entirely. They make others addicted to their accessibility while remaining detached from the need to provide it. They become the drug, not the addict. They create dependency while maintaining independence. They generate need while feeling none themselves. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of building genuine power. You must become completely comfortable with others' discomfort, with your unavailability. Most people crack under the pressure of others' expectations. They feel guilty for not responding immediately, anxious about not being constantly accessible, worried about disappointing those who want more access than they're willing to provide. The untouchable persona requires that you develop immunity to these social pressures, not through hardening your heart, but through clarifying your priorities. You must reach a point where your respect for your own time and energy exceeds your need for others' approval of how you spend that time and energy. Now that you understand the foundation, let's explore the deeper mechanics of becoming truly untouchable. Because knowing the theory is worthless without understanding the precise execution. And execution is where most people fail catastrophically. A ruler, Machiavelli writes, must learn how to protect himself through fear, not love. Love is dependent on others, and therefore unreliable, fluctuating with mood, circumstance, and competing interests. Fear, however, is created by you and controlled by you. When you deny access, when you pull back, when you remain silent when others expect answers, you begin to inspire the useful kind of fear, the kind that keeps you in control. But let us be absolutely clear about something crucial. We're not talking about the fear that comes from threats or aggression. We're talking about the fear that comes from unpredictability, from competence, from the sense that you're always several moves ahead. It's the fear of not knowing what you're thinking, not knowing what you're capable of, not knowing what you'll do next. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Silence is tension, and tension builds power. The untouchable man doesn't fill every pause with words. He lets pauses stretch until others feel compelled to break them. He speaks only when it shakes the room, only when his words land with impact that reverberates long after he's finished speaking. This isn't about being mysterious for mystery's sake. It's about understanding that your words lose power through overuse. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered. They're not the ones constantly talking, explaining, justifying, or seeking validation through verbal output. They're the ones who pause before responding, who consider their words carefully, who make others feel that every sentence they speak has been weighed and measured. Their silence carries pressure, because others know that when they do speak, it will matter. The untouchable persona is built on the recognition that most communication is noise, and noise dilutes signal. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. When you appear less frequently, your presence creates more impact. When you give your approval less freely, it becomes more valuable. This is basic economics applied to social dynamics, but most people ignore it completely. Control your environment completely. Let no one believe they fully know you. Let no one think they have access to your core thoughts, motivations, or plans. Keep them guessing. Keep them doubting. Keep them analyzing. Never let them see your full hand, only what you deliberately choose to reveal. And let that always be just enough to confuse rather than clarify. People are psychologically addicted to predictability. The average person seeks routine, clarity, transparency in others because it makes them feel safe and in control. But Machiavelli teaches that a ruler should be strategically unpredictable. When others don't know your next move, they fear making the wrong move themselves. When they fear their own actions might trigger an unexpected response from you, they hesitate. And their hesitation is your advantage. Become ruthlessly disciplined with your presence, your time, your words. Most people overshare constantly, trying to prove themselves, explain themselves, justify themselves, or boast about themselves. They reveal everything unless there's a specific reason to hide it. The untouchable operate from the opposite principle. They reveal nothing unless it serves as a strategic weapon. Talk less than necessary. Pause before you respond to anything, even simple questions. Watch more than you speak. Study everyone around you constantly. Trust no one completely. Your emotional access must be even more restricted than your physical access. Others must not know when you're happy, when you're angry, when you're excited, or when you're disappointed. Do not celebrate publicly. Do not mourn publicly. Do not express frustration publicly. Let no one think they understand your emotional landscape, because the moment they know how you feel, they know how to manipulate those feelings. People use your emotions against you as weapons, as leverage, as pressure points. That's why you must become emotionally invisible, not emotionless, but strategically opaque about your internal state. Never let them think you need them. The moment others feel that you need them, that you depend on them, that your success or happiness requires their participation, they will begin to manipulate that dependency. They will test it, exploit it, use it to extract concessions from you. But when you act as if everyone in your life is replaceable, when you demonstrate that your life moves forward, regardless of their presence or absence, they kneel. This doesn't mean being cruel or dismissive. It means being genuinely self-sufficient and making sure that self-sufficiency is visible. It means building your life, your success, your satisfaction in ways that don't require specific people to maintain them. When others see that you don't need them, they begin to need you. Your time must feel expensive. Your presence must feel sacred. Your attention must feel earned. Even your kindness should feel like a reward that's been merited, not a baseline expectation. To build an untouchable persona, you must systematically starve the world of unrestricted access to you, and only feed them what keeps them interested but never satisfied. You are not here to satisfy anyone's curiosity, emotional needs, or social expectations. You are here to reign over your own existence so completely that others naturally fall into orbit around your gravity. A king doesn't run into the crowd to prove his worth. He makes the crowd wait, and their waiting proves his value. A lion doesn't explain his silence or justify his distance. He lets his silence speak volumes about his self-containment and power. The untouchable man is never emotional in his responses. He is never impulsive in his decisions. He is never reactive to others' provocations. He is cold, deliberate, and unforgettable. In the kingdom of power, he doesn't defend himself with tears, tantrums, or emotional outbursts. He builds a reputation so fierce, so consistent, so unshakable that no one dares to challenge him directly. Never protect yourself with emotion. Protect yourself with legend. Emotions are a detailed map of your weaknesses, and when you display them, you give your enemies a blueprint for attacking you. They learn what triggers you, what rattles you, what makes you unstable. That information becomes power in their hands, and once they possess it, you're no longer untouchable. You're a puppet whose strings they can pull at will. Machiavelli warns that princes must be masters of deception, not prisoners of their hearts. You may feel everything intensely, but you must show nothing that compromises your strategic position. The world is watching constantly, and the world is brutal in its willingness to weaponize your honesty, mock your vulnerability, and exploit your empathy. So you must systematically bury the emotional responses. You must kill the reflexive need to be understood. Replace every impulse to have an outburst with strategic silence. Replace every urge to confess your feelings with calculated presence. Your reputation becomes the fortress that protects you, and you must build it high, build it dark, build it so impenetrable that even your silence creates tension in others. When you enter a room, people should adjust their behavior. When your name is mentioned in conversation, voices should naturally lower. This doesn't happen because of emotional display. It happens because of unwavering consistency in your standards, your boundaries, and your responses to violations of those boundaries. Control your image until it becomes legend. Until your mere presence implies danger, commands respect, and maintains mystery. You must be known for precision in everything you do. Never raise your voice in anger. Never argue when you could simply act. Never justify your decisions when you could let results speak instead. Let others shout and complain while you operate above them. Calm, ruthless, surgical in your effectiveness. One cold action speaks louder than 100 emotional reactions. You don't need to scream about vengeance or justice or fairness. You just make one example that bleeds quietly but permanently. This is what terrifies people about truly powerful individuals. The ones who smile while dismantling empires, who don't flinch under enormous pressure, who forgive nothing but speak as if they forgive everything. That gap between your calm demeanor and your demonstrated capability, that's the fear zone where real power lives. And fear, properly cultivated, creates immediate obedience. Machiavelli reminds us that it is far safer to be feared than loved, because fear doesn't fluctuate with mood or fade with time. It stays, it shapes behavior, it locks mouths and bends knees. But fear without control becomes chaos. That's why you don't create it with threats or aggression. You create it with legacy, with reputation, with consistent follow-through on consequences. The person who builds a ruthless reputation doesn't need to act often because his past actions do the talking. His enemies disappear quietly. His allies know their limits instinctively. His rivals walk carefully around his name. That's how reputation becomes a weapon that multiplies your influence without requiring your constant presence. Most people won't even test you if your reputation is severe enough. You'll never need to draw your sword because they'll cut themselves trying to reach you. That's the difference between the touchable and the untouchable. The touchable are constantly defending, constantly reacting, constantly explaining their value. The untouchable never have to, because their silence carries the weight. Their name carries the fire. At the highest level, you reach a state where you no longer react to provocations, not from weakness, but from calculation. You no longer chase validation, not because you don't care, but because validation is currency for common people, and you've transcended common existence. Your persona is built, the myth is alive. You've become untouchable not by accident, but by deliberate design. You've silenced the parts of yourself that begged for attention. You've killed the reflex to explain. You've burned the bridge back to normal human neediness. You've transformed your absence into influence, your unpredictability into fear, and your name into legend. You no longer exist on their timeline. You don't respond to every voice or attend every conflict. They wonder if you even notice their attempts to provoke you, and that wondering becomes more terrifying than their anger. This is when your enemies stop attacking and start watching, because they can predict what you'll do next, and they know you know exactly what you're doing. You don't just win. You win in ways that no one understands, because understanding invites imitation, and you weren't born to be replicated. You were born to dominate in silence, to let them wonder if you care, to question your motives, to bleed trying to predict you. Because the storm never explains itself. It just arrives and changes everything.